Hi, my name's Chris Gain. I work as a UI engineer at CrowdStrike. And I want to talk to you about how we've grown with Ember to be the size of company that we are today. You might have heard of CrowdStrike. You might know us from such newsworthy events as the November 2014 Sony Pictures hack, where we uncovered evidence implicating the government of North Korea and demonstrated how the attack was carried out. Or the 2015 and 2016 Democratic National Committee, DNC, cyber attacks, where we, along with Delis and Mandiant, FireEye as it was at the time, forensically analysed evidence and found strong indications that two Russian intelligence agencies separately infiltrated the Democratic National Committee computer systems. We then removed the hacking programs and revealed a history of previous encounters with both groups, having already named them Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear, which was featured heavily in the media at the time. Those are the names we use to track them, but they're also referred to as APT-29 and APT-28 respectively by the US government. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. Or maybe, more likely, you know us from the events published around 2019. A transcript of a conversation between Donald Trump, the President of the United States at the time, and Volodymyr Zelensky, the President of Ukraine, in which Trump asked Zelensky to look into CrowdStrike. If you don't know us, we are the one platform, one agent solution to protecting your organization. You install a single agent on each of your. When it detects anything of interest, it sends it up to the cloud. That data can then be viewed through our UI. That's a very simplistic view of what happens. The sensor can also block attacks and be used to run commands remotely from our UI, which we refer to as the Falcon console. But to give you an idea of the kind of scale we're now operating at, in a 24-hour period, we receive over 1 trillion sensor events. So that's a 1 and 12 zeros, which is a lot. CrowdStrike was founded in 2011 on the back of a napkin, or so the story goes, but Ember became part of CrowdStrike in March 2012. So that's where we'll start. The initial version of the UI was mainly developed by a contract team run by Tilda. So way back in the commit history, there are some names you might recognize. Dan Gebhardt, ex-Ember core team member, makes his first commit. At this point, we're on Ember version 0.981, and we're using CoffeeScript. There's 9 people contributing to the UI at this point. In 2013, Peter Wagenet, current Ember core team member, makes his first commit, and Jo Liss, author of Broccoli.js, made her first commit. There are now 12 people contributing to the UI. It's 2014 now. UI engineers are now being hired, and the contract team is being phased out. The Ember app is now being served by Rails, using Brunch as a build tool and Compass for styling. In 2014, our first add-on was created that contains some common UI components. This would become the bedrock on which all other apps would be built. The first commit message reflects the gravity of this moment. The common components were a search field, an input field, a select all checkbox, a selectable list, a spinner, and facets for a filter bar. We're now on Ember version 1.4, and we're not using CoffeeScript. There are 12 people contributing to the UI. In 2015, we adopted feature flags. This is so we can merge code behind a flag and enable it for some or all customers via separate internal UI. We also created a separate add-on that encapsulates our API layer. We moved away from Ember data at this point because we were mainly fetching data, a lot of it. There was an overhead to passing that data through Ember data that would pay back if we needed to have state tracking when data was edited. But as we didn't, we decided to avoid the overhead and gain some performance. The API layer includes a way to auto-generate the API from a Swagger doc and allows for the generation of mock data and use in much the same way as you might use something like Mirage. We adopted the pods layout for all our add-ons and projects, co-locating our templates, components, controllers, etc., rather than having a folder for each type of thing. We also started using Ember CLI page objects to allow tests to be written more easily by providing a helper to operate a component so that the work is done once but used everywhere. And we started using Ember CLI deploy for the first time. This is an integral part of our development workflow, allowing PRs to be reviewed and demoed without the need for every reviewer to pull the branch or build locally. There are now 13 people contributing to the UI. In 2016, we made our first design system, Phoenix, rising from the ashes of all that had come before. It was a massive amount of work that was completed in only 6 months. We are a remote-first company, but this was an occasion where it was better to have everyone together in one place to collaborate. This was the chosen location. Phoenix was publicly unveiled at the Black Hat conference. It was used on our internal tools as well as on the external product. It was initially unpopular because of the change it forced, but over time, this was seen to be a change worth making. A large part of why the changes were successful was the amount of feedback taken from internal users, both in the concept phase and after release, to further improve existing features and add new ones. This is an example of a dashboard in that design system. And this is an example of a filter bar and a table layout. This is a pretty common page layout that will exist somewhere in most of our apps. And this is the Process Explorer. In this case, we're looking at a process that has been blocked. That's the icon that has the turquoise shield next to it, and its parents and their siblings. So what do I mean by a design system? Well, the Nielsen-Norman Group says, a design system is a set of standards to manage design at scale by reducing redundancy while creating a shared language and visual consistency across different pages and channels. That was definitely an aspiration, but at this point, we had a collection of components that were easy to use and fairly well documented, along with some standards that were well documented for API contracts and some general design guidelines. It was enough for where we were at that point. It created a lot of consistency in what people built, and they could do it quickly because there was so much ease of reuse. Also coupled with the introduction of the design system was an entirely new deployment pipeline. Per application repos were introduced, and the UI was separated from the back end as part of an API-first model. We now have, or at this point, we have 10 apps and 14 people contributing to the UI. When do we create apps? We sell the product in modules. Each one of those modules contains one or more Ember apps. So, for example, in the graphic, if you look at this security operations module in the middle, Discover and Spotlight are both separate apps within that. The other two are kind of service departments, so it doesn't quite work, but you get the idea. All the modules are hosted under a common domain to give the illusion of a single app to the customer. A navigation UI component is provided to allow the customer to move easily between all of the different apps. So at any point where some substantially different functionality is added to a module, a new app is created. There's also a permission system within each app that only allows access to some areas for some users. Login is another separate app that fronts the whole experience. 2017 now. We're heads down building the product at this point, and there aren't any big changes to the tools we're using. We have 11 apps at this point and 16 people contributing to the UI. 2018. We're still heads down building another app this time and adding to the existing ones. We have 12 apps at this point and 22 people contributing to the UI. In 2019, we adopted Ember CSS modules and Prettier. We adopted TypeScript incrementally. We're actually doing this pretty aggressively, but some areas of the product are not being touched right now, so they will only be migrated when they are. So that's what makes it incremental. We also created foul test. Why foul test? What is foul test? So we needed a way to test the app when deployed, and we wanted to mimic user behavior as closely as possible. Other popular testing solutions at the time were still adding something into the browser session rather than interacting like a real user. So foul test is our wrapper around WebDriver IO. It understands our user roles, understands our feature flags, and it's expected to only carry out smoke tests to validate the live API and app work together. So it works in tandem with the testing we have. We also created a new design system, Toucan, designed to replace Phoenix. This was also provided a timely opportunity to start again using the Octane edition of Ember. A new app was needed around the same time, so this app was built from scratch, with all the components it required being created in the Toucan design system. Toucan fully clears the bar set for a design system by the Nielsen Norman Group. Here's a screenshot of the first app that was created, CrowdStrike. We now have 19 apps and 34 people contributing to the UI. In 2020, we started to internationalize all the apps. We made a dashboards app in the Toucan design system, which looks like this. We switched to a monorepo. Why a monorepo? Well, as we had grown, we had diligently been creating separate add-ons here and there. But as a fast-growing company, we found that often we would need to make a change to an app and a few, or maybe all, of those add-ons to make the feature we wanted to release. This meant having to make multiple PRs for what was essentially a single feature, each of which had to be reviewed separately. We'd gone through an evaluation process and collapsed some of these add-ons into each other, and it did prove to be a benefit, making changes easier to reason about as they could be viewed together, whilst also speeding up the reviewing and CI process by effectively reducing the load. But there was another potential win. With everything in one place, it would be possible to walk the dependency graph to determine what needed to be tested. Running those tests would confirm that the latest change could safely be accepted by all its consumers. The only problem was, when we looked at the time, nothing seemed to do that the way we wanted. So we built something to do that part. It's called Monorepo Next. When I say we, mainly Kelly Selden. We have 36 apps at this point and 47 people contributing to the UI. So now we're in 2021. We've adopted Fractal Page Object, moving on from Ember CLI Page Object because it has better TypeScript support and a cleaner implementation in general. And we started using Tailwind for styling, which has been great. One of the easiest changes we made, but it's been one of the biggest benefits in terms of productivity. It stopped us having to spend time naming classes, managing separate CSS files, and waiting for the Sass compilation step. It also allows components to be moved around more easily and makes for more concise examples in the design system. In the design system, we added a force layout view. We added all the components necessary to create a filter bar and table layout. And all of these screens in the new design system are available in light mode as well. You just have to click the sun icon in the top right. We also started organizing ourselves by product teams. We had got to a size where the subject matter of the product areas themselves required more context switching than working on the data layer versus the presentation. So it made sense to let people work consistently in the same areas of the product. We have 49 apps at this point and 131 people contributing to the UI. And then now, 2022. Efforts are underway to switch over to using Embroider. We are swapping from Yarn to PNPM. We're upgrading all of our add-ons to the V2 structure. You can see one here, Ember Headless Table. A headless table implementation that supports all the major product level features needed for feature-rich tables. You bring your own markup and styles without the need to re-implement any of the table behaviors like hiding and showing, reordering, resizing columns, or sorting data. Nullvox Populi has put a lot of work into this. Also, we created our second monorepo because it worked so well the first time. So this was done because having the version of Ember used by the Phoenix design system in the monorepo was holding back progress to Embroider, amongst other things. The decision was taken to take a copy of the monorepo, remove all the things Toucan from it, and then remove all the things from Phoenix in the original monorepo. This unlocks our future whilst protecting our past. We have 69 apps at this point and 222 people contributing to the UI. So this is how marketing presents our offering today. They now refer to modules rather than applications because the surface area of the product has increased so much. And this is what some of that journey looks like when plotted over time. The pink line is the number of apps, and the brown is the number of contributors to the code base. I wanted to illustrate how much time had passed from a release of an Ember version until we adopted it. So the top set of bars are when we started using the Ember version, and the bottom are when it was released. So you can see from there, we adopted 1.4 as it was. 1.8 we were a bit slow to adopt, and you can see as we flow through. So we're generally lagging a little bit. Every now and again there's something we desperately need, so we'll be in line with it. And then we've taken a little while to stay on the latest version towards the end, but we're getting better at it, putting more resources into it. Generally we try to stay on the latest LTS release most of the time, just because of the effort to upgrade and the amount of features we were trying to release at the time meant that was a good split in terms of stability and still being able to produce. As of today, or yesterday, I'm pleased to say that all the applications based on the Toucan design system are on Ember 4, just. If I plotted the number of add-ons we had as a line here, you'd also see that there weren't that many until the monorepo was created. But now there's barely any overhead added after making a new add-on, and a performance benefit to local builds and CI because we have change detection on when any add-on needs to be built and tested. We've begun to split out more and more add-ons. A couple of other important takeaways about our journey so far are the amount of code that was added in the early stages and is still present now. So that would be the data layer and some of the components. This is a result of finding some good abstractions early on and making sure to have a process that governs the correct use of those abstractions. The other one is testing. Even though we've grown at a fairly fast rate and there's often been a huge pressure to get things done, we've always written tests. This is because of how easy Ember makes it to write those tests. Had we used another framework, I'm not sure we'd be in that position. So that's all I've got, but I'm happy to answer any questions you've got. I don't know, a lot. Not as many as we'd like, because the queue's quite long of things backed up to, to go out. Yeah, I don't know. That's really governed by the resources that we have on. So there's never enough, basically. Like, we're kind of resource constrained, if you like, there a lot of the time. Yeah, no, I should try and pull a number for that, because it would probably be pretty high. But yeah, essentially there's a lot of stuff we're doing now. Like, one of the big reasons to move to Embroider, I guess, is that because of the amount of code we have now, any of those build improvements are massive for us, because we're not building one thing, we're building, 70 apps, probably more than that, more than those in terms of add-ons as well. And so all that change, anything incremental is going to make a massive difference, and therefore, we get more out of each agent we've got on CI. Yeah, so like there's a lot of work done there. I think yeah, we got to a point where that became a bottleneck at a certain stage, and then we felt like, I guess there's always this conflict about how much you produce versus how much you look after the future, and we felt like we'd done really well in terms of producing stuff when it was needed and when it was asked for, but we definitely needed to go back and kind of spend some time streamlining what we've got and the shape we've now got into. So yeah, so there's a lot of that going on at the moment, and Preston Narvox Populi is leading that at the moment, basically to try and get us all up to date. But it is having big improvements, yeah, and we're working out that as the way we. I'm going to try and say as much as I can without contradicting myself or Preston, but yeah, so like PNPM I think is a big step in that as well, and untangling a lot of the dependencies that we have. So some of those are quite hard to extract, and so that's kind of taking a little bit of time to separate. But yep.
Cool. Runspired's asked, with that many things, can you even use GitHub Actions?
So we can't use anything GitHubby because we can't have anything off-prem basically. So we are stuck with older CI tools and source control. Well, yeah. So that's kind of one constraint, I guess, of what we do is that we don't get to use the cool cloud stuff all the time unless it's, in an area that's kind of acceptable or whatever. So yeah, some of that stuff, the UIDX team put a lot of effort into that basically. And I know Kelly's done a lot of work there to try and get those tools to function like modern equivalents, even though they are some way behind. And yeah, that's pretty hard work, especially now we've got so many people to get that to a stage where it works for everyone.
Cool. There's one more here. There's an opinion that migrating a mature code base to TypeScript is not feasible. Have you disproved that? And Preston said yes, but do you want to elaborate? Or is that somewhat?
Yeah, I'd say, I think we are migrating it. I think it's one of those things where you get the most value from it when it's all done. So for sure, if you either start with it or you're able to migrate from the data layer up, that's going to give you the most value. We didn't have that choice. But we do have the option of when new products need creating, we start from scratch. So that is a from the beginning thing. And so there's certain areas where you get the value straight away, other areas where you don't. But I guess, we're committed to it. And so we're just gradually reducing the areas that aren't TypeScripted. I think it's massively valuable. Like once you get there, there's definitely some stuff I think with Ember, like when you go through the template layer, you're not getting that type safety or whatever, but I think that will improve in time. But yeah, like it's huge in certain areas that we do. And I guess the more you make things that are, say, separate from the templates or whatever, which we do have a lot of stuff, then you're in pure classes and things like that. And then it's just, it's a great thing to have. Yeah, makes you write more diligent code and everything else. But I think, in terms of the migration, it's very much like you have to commit to it and stick to it. I think we pretty much have a rule that you're going in somewhere and changing it in any significant way, you need to convert it as well, and that's kind of packed into the estimates. I think if you leave it to someone to do, or it's like a task on its own, then it's always going to be that tech debt that's hard to justify paying off. But yeah, I'd agree with Preston. We're getting there.
Awesome, man. Thank you for that. Marco?
I have a question as well. As this chart shows, you have loads of people and you hired like 180 people over the last 2 years, roughly.
Yep.
I'm sure a lot of them did not have Ember knowledge before starting work at CrowdStrike, right?
Yep.
So do you have any experience how to onboard people in an Ember code base, how to teach them the concepts, how to make them productive?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, so there's two things probably. First one is we've got a really good book, which is Rock and Roll with Ember.js. And that is a lot of starting point for a lot of people onboarding, basically. So they'll take some time to go through that, understand the concepts. I guess because of the volume of people we've hired people that are more comfortable with Vue, more comfortable with React. So we've got kind of articles that allow people to map the concepts from one to another. So that helps people just transition that, they already know what they want to do. It's just you're talking about one of these rather than one of those, and it works slightly differently maybe. I think, the other thing is probably that because of the design system and the way things are spaced out, you spend probably more time needing to orientate yourself with the design system, so like our abstraction, if you like, over the components we have, as you do with the inner details. So if you imagine like a team starting a brand new app is going to need to know how to build routes and things like that. If you work on a team that only maintains the componentry, you never see any of that. It's all just component layer stuff, which probably has a lot more overlap with existing concepts in other frameworks. And I think other than that, there's just a really good support between different teams, for people that have more experience that they can just reach out. And I think it's kind of, I think people find it, I think there's so much to learn, and it only increases because of the rate the company moves at and the concepts that are covered and things like that, that I think I guess maybe that's a benefit that people are already out of their comfort zone before they start, and they're happy to, like, they're learning everything, if you like, to onboard. But yeah, I think rock and roll is great. I think the mapping tools really help as well, and I think it's shout out to Preston as well, because he's got experience in all, and it's always good to kind of chip in and explain, how this works differently and why it might be better than this or whatever, what the different concepts are. But yeah.
And sort of a follow-up question on that, do you have like a developer platform team or whatever you want to call that, like a team of people that exclusively focuses on making others more efficient by, building abstractions and infrastructure things and so on?
Yeah, so I guess that's now UIDX now, basically, that for some time was Kelly and now is a team of people. There's a few things like that where things have either been one person's role or even just part of their time that, as we've grown, have become actual departments or whatever. Groups, yeah. And so, yeah, no, we do. I think there's kind of two sides to it, if you like, the CI and the tooling and stuff like that. And then separately at the moment, the effort to migrate onto the latest stuff. But there's a lot of overlap there in terms of things that need to change in the pipeline because of changes that are occurring in the package layer. Yeah, and then there's also like a separation between people that are building products on a fast cadence that have very tight deadlines, and then a more kind of slower cadence for the component layer that's more researched. We have to meet accessibility guidelines and things like that as well. So those things run at a slower rate. We provide all that tooling and documentation to the teams that need to go quick. And if they haven't got something that they need, then they can deviate and just do what they need to do to get over the line. But we'll come back and kind of revisit that afterwards.
Cool. Nice. Thanks, Chris.
All right. No worries. Thank you.